This is your evening news update for Friday, July 23. So glad you could join us. Government is cracking down on visitors and locals alike who present fraudulent COVID-19 documents at the island's ports of entry. At a press conference this afternoon, Prime Minister Mia Mottley disclosed that authorities had uncovered numerous counterfeit certifications, and she made clear that anyone caught will face stiff penalties. According to Directive Number 13, persons found guilty will face up to 1 year in prison or a fine of $50,000. However, when separate legislation is taken to Parliament, it will make provision for the penalty to be increased to 2 years imprisonment and a fine of $100,000.
If you feel that you've gotten past the airport or the seaport with a fraudulent certificate and you feel it's over, don't feel it's over, because there's something called post-entry audit, and we will do post-entry audits. And if we find that you have given us a test result that the person or the lab from which it has come cannot verify and cannot validate that you received a test or you received a vaccination, then, my friends, it will be passed over to the right authorities for further action. I say this conscious that I've heard some people say, oh, the people who were doing it were only just trying to get it done because they were late for the plane. Well, it will be the most costly delayed arrival at the airport that you will ever have in life. So I would like to humbly suggest that if that happens to you, pay the change fee and come another day and get the right tests, because we are not taking chances with people, and we will do the post-entry audits, and that is why the Attorney General is here to assure us.
The move is among few changes in the latest set of COVID-19 directives. The Prime Minister announced that the current curfew has been extended by 2 weeks, among other measures.
As a result of the information given to us by the Ministry of Health, we continue to be concerned, but it is not a situation, as I indicated 2 days ago, that requires any further lockdown. We will hold the curfew for another 2 weeks, and the Attorney General has already drafted the directive for me. There are 1 or 2 changes in it. Those involved in wrestling and boxing and martial arts will be permitted to do non-contact training and non-contact shadow boxing, or whatever it is they call themselves. They do, but no contact sports, no contact within those 3 sports.
Meanwhile, Health and Wellness Minister Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic assured that despite the current spike in COVID cases, the island's positivity rate remains low. He noted that authorities are monitoring 10 COVID clusters, and while the country is not out of the woods just yet, cases continue to trend downward. Bostic is, however, concerned that most coronavirus patients are unvaccinated.
None of the persons in primary or secondary isolation are vaccinated. And regrettably, a significant number of those persons, well, significant in recent times, I'm speaking like perhaps 14, 15, 16 persons, had to be oxygenated. They're either on CPAP machines or receiving some form of oxygen because of their symptomatic conditions. And I would take this opportunity once again to ask Barbadians who have not taken a vaccine at this point in time to do so, because it is important that you do so.
The issue of vaccination will be discussed next week by the Social Partnership. There's been much public debate on whether workers should be vaccinated. Mottley noted that while workers will not be forced to take the vaccine, employers still have to take precautions to ensure the work environment is safe for all employees.
And the reality is that it is not only that an employer has an obligation to keep a safe place at work, and we will discuss that next week with the Social Partnership, but there are also implications, because regrettably, persons who are responsible for hurting somebody else by deliberately or recklessly transmitting the virus to them, knowing full well that they're working in first and close quarters, will be putting themselves at risk, not only medically, but obviously also legally. And I really, really hope that a strong discussion in the Social Partnership next week will begin to allow us to see the changes that we need to see in terms of the uptake. We've done well, don't get me wrong, we've done reasonably well compared to most others in the hemisphere, but we are not yet where we need to be. And as I said, 1/3 of the adult population is not sufficient.
The government also used the press conference to update the country on recovery efforts following Hurricane Elsa. Motley reported significant progress has been made in repairing affected homes.
Of the 2,177 cases that I've just referred to, we've completed assessments of 1,391, and those assessment teams are constituted with engineers, project managers, quantity surveyors, people who are versed in this task. To that extent, that 1,391 completed assessments represents 64% of the total cases having been assessed. Of those 1,391, 352 houses will have to be complete new builds from scratch. They cannot be repaired. 968 houses will be repaired, and basically anything above 60% repairs requires a new house. Materials requested, 18 people requested materials rather than having their house rebuilt or repaired. And then there are 53 others that have multiple different configurations that have to be dealt with on an individual basis.
In other news this Friday, opposition leader Bishop Joseph Atherley today called on the government to disclose where the $65 million spent annually to rent office spaces for government departments is going. He made the call at the official launch of the restoration of the old welfare building at Country Road, St. Michael, as he raised concerns about the large sums of money being spent on rental accommodation.
I think people want to know some details with respect to that. I'm not trying to be troublesome. I appreciate the courtesy of being here. But I think it would be in the interest of government, interest of this minister, if people can know how that $65 million is apportioned, because there's a lot of money being spent every year, and I'm glad that some of it will be saved when we can bring this building back into use at a fairly minimal cost, from what I hear, $700,000.
Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, Dr. William Duguid, who admitted that a significant amount of money has been spent on renting office spaces, told Atherley government is equally concerned and is working to reverse the situation.
The Labour affairs, yes, we do spend a lot on rental, but having said that, a lot of that rental is investment by the National Insurance Scheme. And the National Insurance Scheme, as you know, over the years has built a lot of rental accommodation. I'll give you an example, the CXC building. And that, and another one, a lot of the buildings in Warrens were in fact built by the National Insurance Scheme. And yes, of course, the public have a right to know how the rent is spent. But granted, we check very, very carefully and renegotiate rentals at all times.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To regional news, the assassinated Haitian president was laid to rest in the northern city of Cap Haitian today. Visiting officials and dignitaries attended the service, somewhat marred by gunfire and protests, as thousands of Haitians demanded justice for their former leader. Widow Martine, who addressed mourners, said her husband was brilliant, creative, and a determined man who was playful but reserved and generous. She welcomed the support of the Haitian people through what she described as dark days for her family and underscored that they don't want revenge, they want justice. On the international scene, China's central region is struggling with the worst flooding in recent history. At least 33 people have died and 200,000 people have been evacuated. Al Jazeera's Adrian Brown reports from Hong Kong.
An image of normality turned upside down. Like a giant scrapyard, abandoned cars block a tunnel in central Zhangzhou. Roads transformed into rapidly flowing rivers, where in some areas, boat is the only way to get around. The city's inhabitants are used to typhoons, but they're still coming to terms with the scale of this week's deluge. It was the heaviest rainfall in 60 years. On Tuesday, more than 200 millimeters fell in just 1 hour. On state TV, the images have been more uplifting. rescuers bringing young and old to safety. Some of the estimated 800,000 residents who've been displaced. The emphasis is on the positive work being done, not on those who've died.
That's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.